Lynn Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hello and welcome to the Friday edition, March 30, 2012, Lynn Cullen Live, and we're going to give you all, and myself, a respite today from the usual hair-pulling, hand-wringing subject matter that we discuss on the program. Reality gets to be a little too much these days in the political realm that we generally find ourselves in. So how's about we head off into fiction, and specifically fiction set here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, written by a Pittsburgh native, now ensconced in Hollywood. Dennis Palumbo has been a guest before on this program. He's delightful. He is, I think, the quintessential overachiever, and it's a pleasure to have him back. Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Lynn. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Now the obligation's on me to be delightful at 7 a.m.
Did I just call you delightful?
You
don't
called
have
me
to
delightful.
be. Okay, you sound conscious. That's all I expect of you at this point.
Well, that's because of coffee.
God bless caffeine. Dennis Palumbo is, oh, Lord, a writer, a licensed psychotherapist. I'm going to do this right from what you sent me. But how about, screenwriter? Were you wait, I want to back up. Because were you not a pugilist as well?
No, not at all.
Okay, I get you mixed up with your fictional
with Daniel
hero.
Rinaldi, sure.
I thought for sure that he was so you that you too were. Did you want to be a fighter?
Not at all, but I wanted something that people wouldn't expect from a therapist. And I thought, well, what's the one thing you don't think a therapist would ever be? And I thought an amateur boxer.
Okay, all right. The therapist in question is Dr. Dennis Rinaldi, who is
Daniel Rinaldi.
Oh, for God's sake! Hey, listen, obviously, I've got a problem
Mixing
separating
the two of us up.
Do you? Okay. Well, how much of him is you?
Oh, there's a great deal, I think, but he's an idealized version of me. But we're both born and raised in Pittsburgh. We both graduated from Pitt. We're both Italian-American, and we're both therapists. But his life story as a child is very different than mine, and his experiences as a therapist are very different than mine. But in terms of the way he approaches doing therapy and a slightly snarky attitude that he has, I think we share that.
You have a snarky attitude?
Well, slightly. Not with my patients.
Yeah, I was going to say, with your patients, I'm sure that
no,
would
not
not
with
be
my
a proper
patients.
approach.
But I think Daniel's issues with authority, with conventionality, with sort of prejudicial or reductionist thinking, he has the same impatience with it that I do.
Well, let's back up and get your bio down, though, so that I stop mixing up Daniel and Dennis. You were born, as you said, in Pittsburgh, PA. You went to Pitt. At what point did you find yourself out there in Hollywood, and what brought you out there?
Well, what brought me out, I had worked for a couple years in the advertising business and really liked film and TV, and so I came out to Los Angeles in the early 70s and was very lucky, and in a couple years I was writing for television. I wrote, well, believe it or not, I wrote the first episode of Love Boat.
Oh, my
with
God.
my then writing partner, Mark Evanier. And then we were lucky enough to get on staff on the writing staff of Welcome Back, Kotter. And so those were really wonderful experiences. And then I went solo as a writer to write screenplays, and I guess the one for which I'm best known is My Favorite Year with Peter O'Toole.
I love that movie. I love that movie.
It's a real good movie, though I think primarily due to Peter O'Toole's amazing performance.
No, who was the young kid in it? Because he was wonderful, too.
Yeah, his name was Mark Lynn Baker. He went on to be in a TV show called Perfect Strangers, I think was the name of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was great. And so I did that for a while. I was a screenwriter and TV writer for about 17 years, and then through a process way too long and complicated to explain, I went back to school and retired from show business and became a therapist. And I've been a psychotherapist in private practice for about 25 years.
Wow.
And retired from film and TV. So I no longer, write film or television, but I write a lot of prose. In addition to my mystery novels, I blog for the Huffington Post, and I have a regular column on the Psychology Today website.
Right. You're a busy guy.
Yeah, I'm very busy.
Well, so, wait a minute. I know you don't want to tell that long story about the career switch, but I'm thinking that if you were in, in the Hollywood realm for some 17 years, that would you would have found yourself. Look at this. I got you as two people now. Yourself as surrounded by a lot of stressed out neurotics. Is that what made you think, hey, there's gold in them dar hills?
I'm not one of those stories where show business was so terrible that I had to leave. I was very lucky. As they say on Saturday Night Live, show business was very, very good to me. I have no complaints. But I had become a patient in therapy myself and kind of fell in love with the process and started volunteering at clinics and hospitals and started taking psychology courses. So it wasn't like I woke up one morning and said, gee, I think I'll be a therapist. But over time, I began to notice that I was actually enjoying my work at the psychiatric hospital more than I was enjoying going to meetings and trying to, convince producers to buy my next movie. And I just liked helping people. It felt good to me. And I thought, gee, do you really want to do this? I mean, I thought I was losing my mind. I kept thinking, I can't change careers now. Things are going well. But I really fell in love with doing therapy and decided to go ahead and switch careers. And as it turned out, it was a wonderful decision because, no matter what anyone says, there is ageism in Hollywood. So by the time I got licensed and went into private practice, I was like 40. And that was I'd had, 17 really good years. But it was a good time, in the therapy biz, I was a young whippersnapper, you know what I mean? So that was kind of funny.
Hey,
I've been doing it all this time and paradoxically rediscovered my love of writing through prose.
Wow.
I mean, I love writing my novels. I've never liked writing more than I do right now.
Okay. What you just, my head goes off in a million different directions. You mentioned ageism in Hollywood. I just read today how it seems like the Hollywood is unsure of, there's a whole bunch of aging baby boomers there now. And I just read that, Bette Midler and Billy Crystal are going to be starring are resurrected and starring in some Hollywood movie coming out about grandparents who are raising their... And I groaned when I saw that. I thought, oh no, are we now going to be treated to all of this... our generation, the baby boomers.
Right.
I'm sick of them. I'm sick of us.
Well, it's funny that you should say that because, first of all, the country is getting older. The demographics are getting older. And if you'll notice, with rare exception, the movies have left baby boomers behind. They're pretty much aimed at urban boys and girls, whereas television is aimed, particularly network television, is aimed at us. And that's why you're seeing so many baby boomer age movie stars, male and female, starting to do television series now, because there really isn't that much work for them in features.
Okay, well, stay tuned, because Billy, I don't know. I was reading one of your columns in Psychology Today, and you told this wonderful story about a young executive in the business. I'm trying to remember, who didn't know.
Who didn't know? Yeah, one of my patients has a friend who's a television writer, and he was saying to this TV executive. The TV executive said, "Gee, you know what'd be great is a TV series where a doctor solves crimes." And my patient's friend, who's a writer, said, "Oh, there was a show like that called Diagnosis Murder." And the executive said, "Really? I don't know that show." And the writer said, "Oh, yeah, it ran for years and years and starred Dick Van Dyke." And the TV executive said, "Who's Dick Van Dyke?"
Oh, dear God.
And see, so to me, the important thing was the astounding lack of historical perspective that executives have today.
Well,
that they don't know who these people were. That before there was Amy Poehler and Tina Fey, there was Carol Burnett.
Yeah.
And Lucille Ball, you know, and these people literally do not know who they are.
But isn't that
stunning to me?
Yeah, but isn't it now? Wait a minute. Now you sound like an old fogey. Isn't it true?
Well, I am an old fogey.
Yeah. But isn't
I'm what's called a graybeard out in Hollywood,
Okay.
and unfortunately, I actually have one.
You know, too bad you aren't a gorilla, because they call them silverbacks. That sounds better.
I like silverback.
Yeah,
That's very cool.
Okay, silverback is better than graybeard. But look, every generation thinks they invent the world, and they have to invent their own. I mean, when we say Carol Burnett and Lucy, but it could be that there were, okay, well, then how about Fanny Bryce? And,
That's
we
right.
can keep going back and back. Every generation thinks they invented everything.
Absolutely. When I was on Welcome Back, Kotter, and I would talk about, like, Carol Burnett or whatever, I remember one of the older writers saying to me, "Oh, you should have seen Imogene Coca on your
Exactly,
show."
right, exactly.
So that every generation gets this kind of grumpy, these kids think they invented the wheel.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we have short memories. Your latest book, is it out in, it's just hardcover now, or is it paperback?
Fever Dream is out in hardcover and paper.
Okay.
And you could also download it as an ebook, like on your Kindle, or you could order it as an audiobook. So there's almost no medium that you can escape Fever Dream. That's the way I look at it. And the publisher is Poisoned Pen Press, and it's been out about 6 months, I guess.
Well, as your first book, at least your first book in this, I guess, what do you call it, a series?
The first book in the series was Mirror Image. That came out in 2010.
Okay.
And this is the second book in the series,
okay.
Fever Dream.
Both set in Pittsburgh, both with the primary character being this Rinaldi, Dr. Rinaldi. And it is why is it so much fun when you read a book and the descriptions of the places are places you can visualize? Why does that add so much to it?
Well, I think for two reasons. Number one, it gives you verisimilitude. I mean, for the reader, they can literally envision it because they've been on it, or they've walked that street, or they knew that building. Right. And I think the second thing is what it does is it says, your town, this could be happening right outside your window. I think there's such strong identification with place. I mean, any social psychologist will tell you that one of our number one identifications as human beings is where we are, place, which is why it's so hard for people to move. It's so stressful to move, because even if we want to move, because we so identify with the place we're at. And they think that goes back to like the cavemen associating their place with security. And so I think when a Pittsburgher reads Mirror Image or reads Fever Dream, there's this calming satisfaction knowing, my God, this is happening right down the street, right under the Fort Pitt Bridge or something like that. And it makes them have that thrill of wow, this could be happening right down my street.
Now, I've been a Pittsburgher for 30-plus years, and for the first 20 years, I was so amazed at how many Pittsburghers were born here and never left and would never even consider leaving, and even how many had left and seen the error of their ways and had come running back. It was so alien to my sense of what somebody did in America, where I thought you were supposed to leave home. And here you are. You said it's so hard to leave for people. Yet you left, and the fact is, though, you set your stories back in Pittsburgh. So in that way, you're still sort of here.
Yeah, I mean, I love Pittsburgh. And in fact, if you want to write film and television, you have to come to Los Angeles. But, most of my patients who are in the entertainment industry are from back east, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, those kind of places. And they've been out here 30 years, and they still wish they lived back where they did. I mean, I don't know if it's something about the East Coast, but I certainly know it's true about Pittsburgh. In fact, according to the Rand Corporation, Pittsburgh is number one among cities whose inhabitants never leave.
There you go.
I mean, it's actually been recorded. And that when they do leave, they do, you're right, absolutely see the errors of their ways and come back to Pittsburgh. And so for me, because my practice is out here and my family's out here and my son goes to school here, my best way back into Pittsburgh is to write about it.
Wow. What is it about?
Plus, it's a great, as my editor calls it, the mean streets of Pittsburgh. It's a great place to set a crime thriller.
Well, Hollywood is increasingly coming here, Dennis.
Yes, it is.
We're getting really hot. You can't walk around the streets here or go to a restaurant and not bump into some star. We're getting blasé around here. We don't even like a rubberneck anymore.
No, I know. It's become the second Hollywood.
Yeah. So tell us, give the audience as much sense as you're willing to without giving away the store. The story about Fever Dream.
Well, Fever Dream is, as I say, the second in the series of novels starring Daniel Rinaldi. Rinaldi is a clinical psychologist, but his specialty is treating trauma victims, the victims of violent crime, people who've been robbed, who've been kidnapped, their car's been jacked, or they've been raped, or they've whatever. And what he does is he helps them deal with the aftermath of that feeling. Well, in Fever Dream, we have a very unusual situation. There's an armed bank robbery happening right in the middle of town at Liberty and Grant. And one of the hostages has been released by the bank robbers, and she's so traumatized by her experience, she can't talk about what's happening inside the bank, and the police need to know. How many men are they? Do they have guns? What's the story? Are any of the hostages dead? The stuff that the police need to know. And so Daniel is brought in to help deal with this traumatized young woman. And then everything goes crazy. There's shots in the bank, and without going into a lot of detail, it turns into a big chase for these robbers. Now, at the same time, the background of this is a political campaign. Wherein Leland Sinclair, the district attorney of Pittsburgh, is running for governor. And what happens as the story unfolds is that Daniel comes to realize that there, as bizarre as it seems, a connection between this botched armed robbery and the district attorney's campaign for governor. And these two twines that seem so disparate slowly start to intertwine as we build to the climax.
Well, I got to tell you, as somebody who tried to follow these strands, I watched Tinker Tailor, What If Soldier Spy last night. And what do you do with someone like me who has trouble following these? I get so discombobulated, and you lost me a few times in your book. And then I find myself again, I remember once I found myself in your book in a parking garage, and I thought, oh, come on, that's just too pat. You guys who are writing it can do whatever you damn well please, jerking the reader around.
Yep. No, that's one of the joys of being a fiction writer.
Ugh.
If we need someone in a parking garage, we just put them there.
You're like one of these conspiracy theorists.
That's right. Well, the thing is, it's kind of a daydream that you're kind of
Right.
navigating or orchestrating. Let's put it that way. It's a daydream that you're orchestrating.
Yeah, I can imagine you at the typing away and like laughing this demonic laugh.
Well, I do have a demonic laugh. I don't know how you knew that, but while I'm typing, I definitely demonically laugh, or occasionally, if it's not that big a deal, demonically chuckle.
Okay. What are your favorite? Who do you look up to in the whodunit category?
Oh gosh, there's so many, but I'd say primarily I like Michael Connelly, Dennis Lee Hain, Sarah Paretsky, Sue Grafton. My God, there's so many.
Yeah.
A wonderful writer is his name just escaped me. The guy who Stag Larson, the girl with the dragon.
Oh,
tattoo.
heck yeah.
And let me see. Gosh, there's so many. Plus some of the old ones. I love Rex South and Agatha Christie, but I primarily like the classics of the 30s and 40s. I like Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, James N. Cain. The people who really kind of invented that hard-boiled kind of film noir, though it's sort of like novelistic noir kind of writing. And then there's the ones who write these standalone books that are quite wonderful, like George Pelecanos and Richard Price. Slightly more literary writers, but beautiful, beautiful crime stuff.
Are you aware that there's another writer in town who is using Pittsburgh to set these police and crime whodunits? Her name is Kathleen George.
I've heard the name. I haven't read them, but I've heard the name. I also read a guy named Tom Lipinski. Wrote,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember his, too.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, gee whiz, if everybody's reading this, they're going to think Pittsburgh is like, crime city.
Well, it is. It's the new hot crime. You can only set so many books in New York and L.A. and Chicago and Miami. I mean, sooner or later, you got to pick some different cities.
Well, in your book, the cops really don't exactly like this doctor coming into their territory. Do you base that in some fact, or is that just for your
on the
fictional
whole,
purposes?
I mean, there's a couple policemen that I've talked to over the years, and they certainly don't like police psychologists. Daniel's not a police psychologist, but whenever a policeman is drinking too much or has trouble with drugs or gets into too many violent situations, he's sent. Here in Los Angeles, they call it you're being sent to Chinatown. Because Chinatown is where there's this nondescript building where the LAPD has 12 police psychologists who, deal with policemen who are taken off duty, put on a desk, and then have to have mandatory treatment. So policemen are very suspicious, I think, a lot of therapists. In Daniel's case, he's in private practice. He doesn't work for the police. Mm-hmm. He consults for the police. The police send him crime victims who have been so traumatized, they're either having such a hard time recovering from the crime that they were involved in, or the DA's concerned that they're going to unravel on the stand and not be able to put the bad guy away. So their problem with Daniel is less that he's a therapist and more that he sticks his nose into their business. The police,
and does their work better than they do,
and sometimes does their work better than they do. But that's a conceit of the amateur sleuth in detective fiction. I mean, let's face it, right. Miss Marple does her job better than Scotland Yard. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the sort of joke convention of crime fiction, is that the amateur sleuth is better at it, primarily not because they're smarter or more experienced, but because of the exact opposite, that they come at it from a very different perspective than the law enforcement officer does.
Now, when you're and your life, you have written so often, both for the screen and now your books. How often do you encounter bugaboo of writer's block?
Well, I used to be blocked a lot. I used to procrastinate is really what I used to do, but I used to be blocked a little more than I am now. Right now, I think because how busy my life is, I kind of don't have time to be blocked in a certain way. But I also look at writer's block a little differently than other people do. I don't think it's necessarily,
bad?
The bad news that people think it is.
Right.
Usually, in my experience, it means the writer's about to maybe make a leap in their work. You know what I mean? They're bumping up against something that's a real step up for them as a writer. I look at writer's block the way I look at, like, human beings have these developmental steps they have to master. Like a toddler has to learn to walk, so they get up, they fall down, they get up, they fall down. Sooner or later, they navigate walking, and so they master that developmental step. And I think for writers, a writer's block is like an important developmental step, a growth in your craft and in your ability as a writer that you have to sort of navigate. And then I think the proof of this is I've never met a writer who didn't feel on the other end of a writer's block, once they've navigated it or gotten through it, who didn't feel that they were a better writer. And so I think writers actually, it's a natural growth step.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, but
so once I stopped panicking, because I think the thing that hurts a writer is not the block, but the meaning they give to the block. If you're typing away there and suddenly, I don't know what to do with this next scene, well, that's just a writer's problem. But if you say to yourself, boy, I bet my parents were right about me all along, I never should have been a writer. Oh, boy, I bet, John Updike never got blocked. I guess if I'm blocked, that means this story is a terrible idea and I should go back to law school. It's the meanings you give to having a block that ends up causing you the most stress, I think.
Well, what's wonderful is you were a therapist, I'm sure, to writers because you specialized in creative people. So when you get you probably you had clients, patients who had writer's block, and you're able to backtrack and give yourself the advice you gave them.
Well, if I'm lucky, of course, physician heal thyself is there's also we often teach what we need to learn. But the reality is I've benefited as much, I think, from having my patients be creative people as they've benefited from the fact that I know what they're talking about. I think one of the major benefits from my patients is if they're anxious about pitching a TV series, for example. Well, I've pitched 1,000 TV series in my career, so I know exactly what they're feeling. If they procrastinate, I know all about procrastination. I'd write a book about it if I ever got around to it. So the reality is, I've been there, and so I think I deeply understand the frustrations they're feeling, and then hopefully we can unlock some of the personal issues that usually are bound up with the issues they're having.
Are you already at work on Rinaldi's next adventure?
Oh yeah, it's
heavens.
called Night Terrors. And the story is about how Daniel is called in to help a retired FBI profiler, a guy who's, spent 20 years, at Quantico in the heads of serial killers. And now he's retired and he can't sleep. He has night terrors. And Daniel is brought in to help him. At the same time, there is a killer out there knocking off people, and they're going to try to work together to stop it. And it's interesting you mentioned show business in Pittsburgh, because the book I'm going to do after this is about when a big Hollywood production company comes to Pittsburgh to shoot a movie.
Oh, cool.
And the star wigs out, and Daniel has to help corral the star and keep him or her from,
wow.
going crazy.
So we're just getting fever dream. You're already, I get the impression, like practically done with the next one, and you're already thinking about the fourth.
No, I'm not done with the next one at all. I'm just beginning Night Terrors.
Okay, but you're already moving into another one.
Yeah,
in
once
your
I
head?
read that The Dark Knight Rises was shooting in Pittsburgh, I thought that's the book after this one. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I know the next one's going to be a Pittsburgh, a Hollywood film crew in Pittsburgh.
Wow. I can't wait. I just love it.
I think that'll be a fun one to write, because I also then get to use all of my knowledge of Hollywood.
Exactly.
and you know, what agents and producers and movie stars are actually like. And,
do we want to know? Book. Okay, who plays Rinaldi in the movie?
Oh gosh, everybody asks me that. I have no idea.
Come on, you don't?
I'm really bad at casting, at that kind of stuff. Actually, the best portrayal of a male therapist I've ever seen was Gabriel Byrne in HBO's In Treatment.
Yes. Well, how about him? That's a great.
There's someone like him, maybe 10 years younger, for all the running around that Daniel has to do.
I saw another column you wrote where you were you were. I don't know if you were annoyed, but you were noting that male therapists are increasingly portrayed as bad guys, as opposed to the wonderful Dr. Byrne or
Oh, absolutely. No. Right now, the male therapist is in bad shape in movies and TV.
Really?
I mean, now it's starting to change a little bit with Gabriel Byrne and the couple times B.D. Wong plays an Asian male therapist. He's pretty good. But, you know, Hannibal Lecter is our model now, you know.
Well, jeez.
There's a lot of bad therapists out there, and they're often portrayed as, they're portrayed as predatory, you know, sleeping with their patients or doing something. But sometimes there are all the way up to being, you know, serial killers and murderers and stuff. And I think it's the same thing as, you know, the portrayal of a doctor or a government person. It's the idea of what is supposed to be a patriarchal figure, someone who represents wisdom and support and kindness turned to the dark side. You know what I mean?
Because we culturally now don't trust any authority figures?
I don't think so. I think part of what's happened to male therapists is what's happened to you know, doctors and lawyers and political leaders and statesmen and scientists. I mean, there's almost no ostensibly positive authority figure that doesn't work well now as a villain in a crime story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in our news stories, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we, you know, in the American media, you know, every time there's some political figure, we've learned some horrible thing about them.
Well, yeah. So we've been let down. It feels like by these people. So
absolutely, and certainly if you think about it, in the last 4 or 5 years since the big economic collapse, I mean, look at Congress's rating in all the polls.
Well deserved, I must say,
and well deserved. I mean, there's not too many, you know, classic statesmen.
No.
In Washington right now. You don't see too many you know, Jeffersons and Madisons running around unless I'm missing them. I don't see them anymore.
Yeah, but Dennis, you have to admit that our media, they like to feed off of you know, the dramatic, and the dramatic is not the adult in the room.
That's right. That's a very good point. In fact, if anything, just now, when I said the thing about Jefferson and Madison, I thought to myself,
they'd be destroyed.
I wonder if Jefferson or Madison could survive the 24-hour news cycle on the Internet.
They certainly could not.
I don't think any human being can survive that level of scrutiny.
No, we excuse me, the media, you know, likes to put somebody on a pedestal and then rip them down. It's the same old story over and over and over again.
That's right. America is about the rise and fall. And you can just put anything in there after that. The rise and fall of blank.
Right.
Because that's the American story.
I have an email from Jason saying, a humble suggestion, will you ask him about his old writing partner, Mark Evaner?
Oh, Mark Evaner.
He said
I had mentioned it before when I was talking about Welcome Back, Kotter. Yeah, I started in television with Mark. We joined up because we figured it would be easier to break into television as a team, and we were right. And also, you know, if you have a meeting or you have a bad set of notes, it's a lot easier for the writer to have someone to complain about it with over lunch with another writer. So we worked as a team on the episode of Love Boat and McLean Stevenson's show and as staff writers on Welcome Back, Kotter. And he's a really, really funny guy, and he's gone on to have this huge career. He's like the maven of animation.
Huh.
And you know, is one of the city LA's #1 guys in animation.
You know, it amazes me how many Pittsburghers there are in Hollywood who have.
Oh yeah,
it's just amazing.
Run the place.
Really?
Oh yeah.
So do you have like a little Steelers Nation group?
You know, it's funny. There's 3 Steeler bars you can go to.
Oh,
here.
I'm not surprised.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm not surprised.
And on the freeway, I would say at least once a week, I drive by a car next to me on the other lane that either has a terrible towel hanging from the antenna or some kind of bumper sticker that says Steeler Nation or Steeler Fan or something. And then you just honk your horns at each other.
Aw.
It's great.
It's great.
It's great.
It's great.
It's great being a Steeler fan. It's one of my favorite things.
What? Okay. I'm trying. Is there? I'm going back to the therapist in you. Is there a personality type that goes into being a therapist, and is there a personality type that sort of goes into writing? And if so, do they bear any resemblance to each other? Because here you are.
Well, I think they do. I don't know if I would say that there's a type. I mean, conventionally, people tend to think that creative people are like more neurotic or messed up than other people.
Don't you agree?
I don't think that's true.
Really?
I think the only difference, I think everybody has operatic passions. I think, you know, people, for example, look at creative people and they go, oh, well, they're so narcissistic and they're so thin-skinned and they're so easily hurt and they're so caught up in their feelings. Well, that's true of presidential candidates. That's true of lawyers and doctors and surgeons. The difference is, for a creative person, their feelings are the raw material of their work. So in other words, if William Styrone is depressed, he writes a book about it. And so we go, wow, writers are really depressed people. But I've worked with doctors and lawyer patients. I've worked with studio executive patients. They're all equally depressed, but lawyers are not inclined to write books about their depression. You see what I mean?
Yes.
And you can say, well, boy, creative people are also narcissistic. More narcissistic than someone who thinks he should be president?
Well, that's hard to do.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
The difference with creative people is because their feeling states are their raw material. It's like a bricklayer can be depressed and an alcoholic, but he's laying bricks every day, and it's not too affected by his interior state.
Yeah, you haven't seen the retaining wall I got in the back of my house.
Well, there you go. But the point is, creative people, the bricks that they use, the bricks and mortars they use, are their interior worlds. And so they're going to talk about them, and they're going to write about them. And so, and to be honest with you, I don't think readers would be able to identify so much with what writers wrote if they didn't have similar feelings that they just don't express in the same kind of way.
Okay, but so what do you think? Here's what I maintain, that with this medicating of so many young kids who don't exhibit totally like what's considered normal behavior, who are jumping out of their seats and have short attention spans, that we are probably destroying the next generation of artists, writers. I mean, don't you think there's truth in that? We're trying to like make everybody into like the same kind of person. I mean, think of all the great.
No, I think one of the worst things that we're doing right now is we're overdiagnosing everything.
Look at this autism thing that's just come out. Do you think that's true?
I don't know. I don't know enough about it to speak to it, but I do think it is clear that too many kids are being
medicated,
given psychiatric diagnoses for acting, in my opinion, like children.
Exactly.
Like they're supposed to.
Right.
And I think on the whole, we trying through, I have a big argument with the use of clinical diagnoses. I think it's overused, and it almost becomes the diagnosis du jour. You know what I mean?
Yep.
For a long time, it was bipolar.
Now it's
and now it's
ADHD.
autism and Asperger's, and For years before that, it was ADHD. I mean, so not that these are not true diagnoses and that people don't suffer from these symptoms, but I think there is an overall attempt to define what's normal.
You know, like,
and I don't know what normal is.
Yeah, exactly. And you hear, like, maybe Einstein didn't speak until he was 3. Well, he would have been today. He would have been diagnosed as something and given some kind of a drug, and he might never have become who he is.
Well, the thing is diagnosis. Remember, its only real value is to have a clinical language that all therapists can understand, so that they can communicate with each other. But it's a real trap if you're not careful. I mean, even in Mirror Image, I have Daniel Rinaldi say, we'll look at it in terms, for example, when a patient's coming to an appointment. If he comes early, he's anxious. If he comes late, he's resistant. And if he comes on time, he's compulsive. So you see, just in there's no normal. Whatever the patient does, he's diagnosable. And see, that to me is a danger.
Oh, God, that is so true, though. That is so
Isn't it true? If
that
he's
is
early, he's
so
anxious.
Funny.
If he's late, he's resistant. And if he's on time, he's compulsive.
Oh, gosh.
The patient is automatically put in a box no matter what he does. And that is what I find so, disturbing about using clinical diagnoses.
Somebody came up with some algorithm recently about Hollywood couples and their chances of maintaining their coupleness. And I was thinking, I feel so sorry for anybody living in that world where everything they do. Is there any way to maintain one's sanity or sense of self if you become a celebrity in this country?
Well, it's certainly difficult because every move they make, everything they say is under the microscope. And I don't think anyone can tolerate or thrive that level of scrutiny, number one. And the pressures in Hollywood, I mean, this is all sort of conventional wisdom, but it is, it's almost a cliche, but it is true. There is enormous pressure. And paradoxically, the other pressure, believe it or not, is if you become so successful that you get everything you want, you begin to lose your sense of reality, and it's very, very tough for relationships to maintain without a sense of perspective, a sense of humor about yourself, and an understanding and willingness to tolerate and deal with conflict. And, if you're someone who's so famous that whenever there's conflict, you call your business manager and your agent and your personal manager and your attorney and just say, okay, people, get me out of this. Well, you can't do that in a relationship.
No. The percentage of these poor celebrities who are able to maintain some semblance of balance has got to be very, very low. I would think.
Well, it is low, but it's not as low as you think. Because
really?
Remember, they don't make the papers. They don't make the news. I mean, I have many of my patients who are very, very successful in the entertainment industry who've been married for 20 or 30 years, but you don't hear about them. I mean, it's much more interesting to talk about, one of the Kardashians or someone who's been married for a minute and a half, because, as you said earlier, we like building them up and then we like finding all the flaws in them and tearing them down again. And the smart actors are the ones who try to keep their personal lives kind of on the down low.
Right, which is not easy to do, though.
Which is not easy to do.
Yeah.
But there's also, to me, the kind of celebrity you want to be is like a Meryl Streep or a Daniel Day-Lewis, where they so husband their personal lives that, and plus they don't seek celebrity. They just try to do good work.
I don't think they live in Hollywood either.
No. Meryl Streep lives in New England and Daniel Day-Lewis lives, I think, in Ireland.
Right. I think that helps.
That certainly helps.
Indeed. Well, Dennis Palumbo, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. You're such an interesting guy. And again, the new book is Fever Dream, available in every genre. There's probably someone on the street right now just screaming it through a bullhorn. I don't know. So the Poison Pen Press. And
you can always read about the book and read reviews of it and stuff on my website, which is cleverly titled DennisPalumbo.com.
Wow.
Yeah, I went for a really clever title.
Hey, speaking of clever, I just have to ask you this because I know it says here that you're, that a licensed psychologist specializing in creative issues. So I was thinking, so if you get a client who comes in and you decide in your head, this guy ain't creative, do you tell him you'll have to leave?
No, because I believe everyone's creative in their own way.
Oh,
they are. Are you
how
kidding?
Very Mr.
If somebody comes home and says to his wife, "Honey, we have my boss is coming to dinner in 20 minutes," and that woman turns around and looks in a closet and says, "Okay, I think if I put this and this and this together, I can make a dinner." That's a creative act.
That is true, but everybody is not creative. You sound like Mr. Rogers.
No. Because you're defining creativity in a very narrow way. You're defining it like as a poet or a sculptor. I think that when a child comes to you with a question that's really hard to answer and you come up with an interesting answer, you're being creative. Creativity, to me, is like Eros. It's just the juice of life where you put what's in your mind and heart to a problem and you solve it. And sometimes you solve it by yourself when you're like building a cabinet and you come up with an interesting way to shave 1/4 of an inch off the wood to make the thing fit. That's a creative act. But if you write a sentence in a poem, you're using the common language of the culture. You're writing something for other people to read, but they are both creative acts. I think you're defining creativity only in terms of something that's a vehicle for public consumption. And I don't see it that way. Not at all.
Oh, you're so generous. You're so generous. I bet.
But I don't think I'm being generous.
Oh, well, you are. Well, I think you are. And if I wish you were around here, I'd come to you as a shrink. God.
I'd be thrilled to have you as a patient.
Yeah. You're just you're an all-around wonderful guy, Dennis Palumbo.
Oh.
Thanks.
You got me on a good day.
No, last time you were here, you were a wonderful guy too. It's just
we had a lot of fun. You're a great interviewer. I have a lot of fun with
Well, thank you. You're a smart cookie. I love your writing, and I loved Fever Dream. And Jess, my producer, now has it, and she can't wait. She's rubbing her hands together. She can't wait to read it.
Oh, I'm so excited. Well,
yeah.
Please don't feel shy about spreading the good word.
We certainly will not. And as soon as the new one comes out, I want a copy. Okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Dennis Palumbo, author of Fever Dream, many other books, Psychology Today, columnist, blogger on Huffington Post, licensed psychotherapist to the stars. Oh, dear Lord. Too much stuff. Wonderful guy. Enjoy the book. It really is fun. Really is fun. We got to get a break in, obviously, and I'll be right back.
More is on the way with Lynn Cullen Live.
Pittsburgh City Paper is available now. Pick up one today for Tigers Be Still, The Moody Blues, La Nueva Madonna, and News of the Weird. Pittsburgh City Paper available at over 1,700 locations throughout Western Pennsylvania and on the web at pghcitypaper.com.
It takes 12 years to create a graduate. It takes about the same time to create a dropout. And at the end of the day, the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be you. So United Way is asking you to make a pledge. Tutor a child who needs help. Mentor a kid who needs someone on their side. Volunteer to read to children. Because when a child advances, we all advance. Be a reader, tutor, or mentor. Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Take the pledge now at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Go to bergbargains.com for great deals on tickets to the ballet, opera, city theater, science center, symphony, history museum, and the Carnegie Museums. bergbargains.com, Pittsburgh's only online deal site where the deals don't expire. bergbargains.com.
Have a question or an opinion? Call Lynn Cullen at 412-316-3381 or email lynn at pghcitypaper.com. Now, more with Lynn Cullen Live.
Well, hi. Welcome back. What a nice guy that guy is. Jeez. nice and smart and capable as heck. What can't he do? Okay, somebody just sent me an email, and I'm so glad they did, because Tim, who's not listening right now, because he says, I can't listen to the show live, so I have no idea what you're talking about right now. But he wanted to present this thought to me, a thought he had, and it's so weird because he had the same reaction I did today when I read the story. Maybe it was, I don't know if it was today or yesterday. No, it was in today's paper. The quote was, and this is in regard to the Western Psych tragedy, quote, this is Post-Gazette, Mr. Zappala said, were it not for a yellow cab that could not pick him, the shooter, up and help him carry a bag of Molotov cocktails to Western Psych on March 8th, quote, it could have been much, much, much worse, end quote. Well, I read that too, and even though I have never laughed at anything regarding, obviously, this horrific tragedy, I have to admit a laugh escaped my mouth because, and this is what Tim says. He says, I remembered you talking about not being able to get a cab in Pittsburgh. And then I read this, and I was thinking, yeah, we were talking about just recently about you can't get a cab in Pittsburgh. Now they're going to have these 6 cabs wandering around the downtown, and if you get into one and you say, take me to Squirrel Hill, they'll say no. We only go as far, only in Pittsburgh would they, think this was some progress to have cabs that will not, in fact, take you where you want to go, but will only take you to a very small area. And the reality is here, this guy called a cab. The killer called a yellow cab the day of the event. The cab didn't show up, which is exactly, thank God for yellow cab and its total incompetence in Pittsburgh, because the guy had intended to take a cab to Western Psych with a satchel or backpack full of Molotov cocktails. And he not only was going to shoot, he was going to throw these things all over Kingdom Come and create a real disaster. So, as Tim says, there's some irony and there's horror and there's, I have to admit, a little bit of amusement on my part that the incompetence of a yellow cab in this case prevented a much larger tragedy. And I had noted that myself. So, Tim, when you're listening to this, and I know you're not listening to it now, thank you for reminding me, because I had the exact same reaction. Oh, dear God. So yesterday, when I told you there was this little blurb that I'm sure next to nobody saw, but I read the paper with a fine tooth comb, there was this little teeny story, and it said, Oakmont police blotter, Dr. Ken, I said Mulaney. I heard someone on TV last night calling him Mulaney, so I'm not sure how it's pronounced. The CEO of Highmark, had gotten into some kind of, had been arrested for trespass and simple assault or something, and nothing else was known about it. And so when the paper had gone to the press, they just hadn't had the. And I said, "Wow, I wonder what this is about. I'm sure we'll know more before the day is out." Well, we know more. I forgot. I intended to tell Dennis Palumbo about this because there, you can see this being the sort of kernel of a whodunit. The paper also suggests that what's his name, Milani, the CEO, had said to the cops, or somebody had said that he would have, if the cops hadn't come, he would have killed them. I mean, there was murder in this guy's heart. He was that crazed. He's that clearly crazed, in love. Here is a guy at the top of the heap. I can see the Highmark building from here. He was at the top of that huge building, making $4+ million a year. One of the, the people that's considered a mover and shaker in town. On top of that, I couldn't help but notice every time I saw him, a picture of him or on television, that he was a good-looking guy, and he was still relatively young. He's in his 50s, early 50s. And I was thinking, wow, here's a guy who's got everything. Well, here's a guy now who has blown it all up. This is the kind of stuff that, television drama is made out of. And invariably, that question of, does art imitate life? I guess so. When you see somebody like a Palumbo writing these stories, these yarns, that you say, oh, but that would never happen. And then you have this unbelievable public meltdown. I believe the Post-Gazette, in the headline today, the word sordid was used for a man who has been at the top of the heap, respected, kowtowed to, his whole life and career taking a certain trajectory, and then poof, self-destruction. And to us, bystanders, it's fascinating. I can step back a little bit, and I did a few times when I was reading the story last night. I just kept shaking my head and thinking, wow, how unbelievable that somebody can lose it like that and destroy everything. He's destroyed his professional life. I would imagine he's destroyed his marriage. I don't know. His wife knew about the affair. His wife had told the mistress's husband about the affair. Here are people, who respected and our betters, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the 1%. We're looking at the 1% here. And there's always a sense that somehow, sordidness has to, that lives with the 99. That lives with, in certain neighborhoods. And the only thing I always sort of get a little bit of a, I guess schadenfreude is the word about this kind of thing, is that I love it when the rich and the powerful get unmasked as no better at all than anybody else. Capable of the same kind of crazed passions and stupidity and self-destruction and destruction of others. Here is a guy who has blown everything to pieces. I feel sorry for him as a fellow person. I can't imagine the torment he is feeling now. Because all of this is a result, frankly, of his libido. He fell in love with a beautiful young woman. He fell in love. And look what happened. And this is, if you look at Greek tragedies, you look at all of this, it's the story of human beings and how the high and mighty fall often, And who do they blame it on? Always. A woman. You can find the whole police account, the report, online, and it reads like some unbelievable television series. It should, belong on one of those cop shows. It is, it's unbelievable. And I couldn't help but notice that in the report, she said, the mistress, that he called her a slut. He called her a slut and charged that she was only after him for his money, which is one of the problems of being a man of that stature. Never quite sure if she loves you or your money. He accused the slut of cheating on him. What's fascinating about that is he accused her of cheating on him with her husband. Is there some confusion there? Have things been turned upside down? His wife comes to the scene. You have 4 people here intermingled. It's beyond belief. I know, incredible. And obviously, bright as blazes, is a smart guy who rose to the top, came out and unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah, Joellen's feeling some of that schadenfreude, too. She writes, I love when people making millions a year act like poor white trash, just with better haircuts and better clothes. There it is. There it is. Humans. Humans all, whether they're in the penthouse or in a trailer park. It makes no difference at all. And in that, yeah. But for all the people here who are really hurting, my very human and genuine sympathies go out to them. But the reality is that all of us are going to be lapping up this sordid story. We're going to be wanting every detail because there's another part of us that love it, that just love it. Okie doke, guys, that'd be it, I believe. I want you all to have a wonderful weekend, okay? And I shall return Monday. See you then.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.